On the night of March 8, 2014, at exactly 12:42 a.m., Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, heading toward its destination, Beijing, China. Sky is clear, weather is calm. A total of 239 people are on board, including 227 passengers, 10 flight attendants, and 2 pilots, along with 239 metric tons of cargo. Most of the passengers are from China. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, is one of Malaysia Airlines' most experienced senior captains. The first officer, Farid Hamid, is 27 years old and was on his final training flight, the last test, before officially becoming a certified pilot. But perhaps he was unaware that this would be the last flight of his life. It was a completely routine journey between Malaysia and China, a flight that usually took about 6 hours, operating daily between the two countries, just like any other. But tonight, this flight was not going to be normal. The flight continued smoothly for about 20 minutes and everything seemed completely normal. At 1:08 a.m., MH370 crossed Malaysia's coastline and moved over the South China Sea, heading toward Vietnam. At that time, the aircraft was flying at an altitude of 35,000 feet, and all communications from the cockpit were just as routine as ever. Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control was now supposed to hand the flight over to Vietnam's control. It's a completely normal procedure. So the Malaysian controller said over the radio, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9, good night. This Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah replied, good night, Malaysian 370. These were the last words ever heard from MH370's cockpit. Just a few seconds later, the flight disappeared from radar with no emergency call and no distress signal. The tracking position of an airplane depends on its transponder, so its disappearance indicated that either both transponders had stopped working or someone had deliberately turned them off. And that night, a new chapter was written, the beginning of the world's greatest aviation mystery.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight
MH370.
Flight MH370
disappeared en route to Beijing.
Number 0, we are ready. Casting telemetry.
Flight MH370 entered in the southern Indian Ocean.
Just 30 seconds after entering Vietnamese airspace, the plane suddenly disappeared from radar. At the time was 1:21 a.m. Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control didn't notice it immediately, and when they did, they assumed the plane had simply flown out of their radar range and entered Vietnam's airspace. Nothing seemed unusual. But Vietnamese controllers saw that MH370 had entered their airspace and then suddenly vanished from their radar screens. They tried to make contact, but there was no response. After trying repeatedly for 18 minutes, the Vietnamese controllers informed Kuala Lumpur that MH370 had disappeared. Normally, the Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center should have been notified within an hour, but in reality, the emergency response began only after 4 hours had passed. At 6:32 inches the morning, the time when the plane was supposed to land in Beijing that day, the aircraft never landed. A search operation was launched immediately. The plane was traveling from Malaysia to Beijing, passing over Vietnam and the South China Sea, so the initial search focused on the South China Sea. It was an international effort that morning. 34 ships and 28 aircraft from 7 different countries joined the operation. But all efforts went in vain, not a single trace of the plane was found. Nearly 4 days later, on March 12th, another report came in the plane had disappeared from civilian radar, but a military radar had detected an unknown object that same night. And surprisingly, according to the military radar, the plane was last seen at 2:22 a.m., but not over the South China Sea. It was near the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, above the Strait of Malacca on the western side of Malaysia. The military radar readings also showed that the plane was heading north along the route toward the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the exact opposite direction of Beijing. This news shocked everyone. Where had the plane gone? Did it head toward India and crash in the Himalayas? Or perhaps somewhere as far as Kazakhstan? A few days later, a new piece of evidence emerged from satellite data. The aircraft had automatically tried to communicate with a satellite. This is quite common as large airliners like the Boeing 777 often attempt to establish automatic links with satellites to make communication easier. Just like a phone that automatically tries to connect to a known Wi Fi network. But here's the problem: when the plane attempted a handshake with the satellite, it was merely a login or connection attempt. No location data was transmitted. The satellite only knew that the plane had tried to connect, but its exact location remained unknown. Some scientists and investigators thought if the satellite received a handshake, then its antenna must have been pointing in that direction. By measuring the angle of the antenna, they could estimate a possible area. The result of this research gave us a large white circle, a region where the plane might have been at that moment. The plane attempted to communicate with the satellite 7 times, which is why you can see 7 white circles on satellite maps. These are called satellite handshakes. Each circle represents an area where the plane tried to connect with the satellite, and the seventh, the last circle, shows the most recent moment when the plane made its final attempt to contact the satellite. This final circle indicates the plane's possible last known location. And this was truly astonishing. The circle was huge, stretching from Kazakhstan and China all the way down to Indonesia and Australia. A massive portion of the ocean fell within this circle. The plane could have been anywhere inside it or possibly even beyond it. This was the final point where the plane sent a ping to the satellite. Investigators then carried out further calculations, taking into account the plane's speed and the remaining fuel at that time. They estimated a small arc on that circle, which later became known as the seventh arc. By following this arc, the plane's probable final area was determined. This seventh arc, the red curved line shown on the map, roughly covers an area about 2,000 kilometers west of Australia. And the yellow dotted outer circle you see represents the plane's maximum possible range if it had all its remaining fuel and estimated flight hours. On the map ahead, the yellow shaded regions show where the initial searches were conducted, and the orange zone represents the priority area where most of the search operations were concentrated. By April 2014, surface search operations were called off because searching from above had proven useless. If the plane had crashed, chances were high that it had sunk deep into the ocean, so the operation shifted toward deep ocean searches. In the area where the ocean search operation was conducted, hydrophones underwater microphones were also checked. It was hoped that they might have recorded the sound of the plane crashing into the sea, but no such signal was ever found. It was the largest and most expensive search project in the world at that time. The search continued for weeks, months, and even years, but after spending $160 million, the operation was called off and declared a failure. Then, in July 2015, a piece of good news arrived. The first fragment of the plane was found on Reunion Island, located east of Madagascar. This proved that some parts of the aircraft had floated across the ocean and traveled a great distance. In 2018, an American company named Ocean Infinity signed a contract with the Malaysian government. They would conduct the search, and if the plane wasn't found, they wouldn't charge any fee, a no find, no free deal. Ocean Infinity had highly advanced underwater survey vehicles. While mapping the ocean floor within the Seventh Arc area, they discovered several complex seabed features, including underwater volcanoes, cliffs, and mountains. They searched for months, but the mission ultimately failed. Malaysian authorities then began investigating the backgrounds of the passengers and pilots to determine whether anyone might have attempted a hijacking or carried out an intentional act. After the investigation, several theories emerged. Let's look at them one by one. The first theory suggested that the plane's disappearance from radar could have happened due to an electrical failure, an accident, an autopilot malfunction, or someone manually turning off the transponder. However, no mechanical or electrical problems had ever been reported with this plane before. In this first theory, suspicion fell on Captain Zahari. Some people believed that he deliberately disabled the communication systems and crashed the plane. Others claimed that his mental state was unstable. Some even speculated it might have been a suicide, while others thought it could have been a hijacking or a terrorist event. One argument that supported this theory was that the plane made an almost 180 degrees turn back toward Malaysia after leaving Vietnamese airspace, and many believed that such a maneuver couldn't have been done by the autopilot alone. It had to be a pilot's action. The second point was that the plane flew exactly along the border between Thailand and Malaysia. Some people believe this was done intentionally so that the aircraft would stay hidden from both countries' radar systems. The third and most intriguing point was that Captain Zahari had a flight simulator at his home, and some investigators discovered that he had once created a flight path on it that was surprisingly close to MH370's actual route. This discovery only deepened the suspicion. However, the official in charge of the search operation strongly denied this theory. He stated that Zahari was a highly experienced and well respected pilot with no major family, financial, or behavioral issues in his personal records that could justify such an act. Zahari was also a father of 3 children. This is a picture of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah from the YouTube channel where he used to upload videos. If the pilot truly intended to commit suicide, there should have been some signs in his behavior, but no such evidence was ever found. Therefore, another major theory emerged: the possible involvement of hijackers or terrorists. When the hijacking theory came forward, suspicion fell on 2 passengers.
Huria Noor Muhammad Mahardad and Dilawar Sayyid Muhammad Raza.
They were traveling with fake passports and both were Iranian. One had stolen an Italian passport, while the other used an Austrian man's passport, both of which had been stolen in Thailand. Investigators believed their intention might have been to reach Europe and settle there. They had planned to travel first to Beijing and then take another flight to Europe. During the investigation, it was discovered that one of their mothers was waiting for him in Hamburg, Germany. However, the terrorism theory was also rejected because apart from the stolen passports, no evidence was found linking them to any terrorist activity. Interpol also stated that these individuals were likely not terrorists. Then came the third and most plausible theory: a sudden loss of oxygen in the cabin, which caused both the passengers and crew to lose consciousness. According to this theory, Captain Zahari and the co-pilot also became unconscious, and the plane continued flying on autopilot until it eventually ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. One possible scenario is that as soon as the plane entered Vietnamese airspace, the pilots noticed some malfunctions and attempted to turn the plane around 180 degrees to return to Malaysia. But while turning back, a major issue occurred that caused cabin pressurization to fail. Everyone on board lost consciousness, and the plane continued flying on autopilot. The military radar detected the plane, and then the autopilot suddenly turned southward. The aircraft kept flying toward the Indian Ocean and probably crashed about 2,000 kilometers west of Australia. In the beginning, many wild theories emerged, such as aliens, a shoot down, political conspiracies, and even a new Bermuda Triangle, but most of these seemed highly unrealistic. Many years passed, and in 2022, a new ray of hope emerged. Richard Godfrey, a retired aerospace engineer, claimed that he had used WSPR radio technology along with other data sources to identify the probable location of the missing aircraft.
Godfrey combined data from British Inmarsat satellites, figures from Boeing, Australian oceanographers, and new WhisperNet amateur radio wave technology. I've been tracking back through the data, and out of that tracking MH370, I'm sure they will be able to find the aircraft.
Godfrey published his WSPR analysis, and his claims and methodology sparked debate. Some experts criticized his method, while others considered it promising. Godfrey combined data from Inmarsat satellites, Boeing's figures, Australian oceanographers, and amateur WSPR net signals to create an analysis. He claimed that MH370 lies along the seventh arc, approximately 4 kilometers underwater. He suggested that the plane could be found within a centered search radius of about 40 nautical miles. Such WSPR-based claims received mixed reactions from experts. Some radio engineers questioned the accuracy of the method. Along with this, a drift analysis was also conducted. By studying ocean currents, investigators estimated where the plane's debris might have drifted if it had crashed in that area. And indeed, several pieces were found on Madagascar and nearby islands. About 27 fragments have been recovered from various locations so far. This drift analysis aligns with Richard's findings, which gives hope that if a new focused search is conducted, we might finally uncover the true story behind this mystery. Ocean Infinity announced in January 2024 that they wanted to restart a new search operation for MH370 under a no-find, no-fee agreement. They stated that they would begin a practical search using their upgraded autonomous underwater vehicles. Following a contract with the government, Ocean Infinity had already started scanning at the beginning of 2025. But on the 3rd of April 2025, the operation was temporarily suspended. Official reason: bad weather and seasonal conditions. However, the company said that they would resume the operation by the end of 2025.
On December 3, Ocean Infinity announced that it will resume the operation from December 30. If this operation proves successful, we may finally learn what truly happened to MH370.
If this operation succeeds, the Malaysian government would pay Ocean Infinity
$70 million